You're listening to Streetside, a Street Medicine Institute podcast.
This is Streetside, the official podcast of the Street Medicine Institute, and I'm your host, Michael Brennan. It gives me great pleasure today to be interviewing Todd Lucero. Todd is a Rochesterian who was homeless for 3 decades on the streets of Rochester, and Todd is going to speak of his lived experience with us today, and we're so happy to have him. Todd, thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, Todd, most of our listeners have not experienced homelessness. They've not been living on the streets. They have not been rough sleepers. So we really appreciate you coming and sharing of your life's journey and your experiences on the streets, as well as your getting off the streets. But I'd like to start at the very beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Where'd you grow up, and what was that like?
So I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. It's hard to explain. My childhood was very uncertain. I never really had any roots. We were constantly moving from place to place, and there were a lot of issues happening. When I first started to really recognize that I was a person or a human being, or I think it was around the age of 6, there was a lot of I would say, there was violence in the house, primarily from domestic situations. There were shootings, beatings, all kinds of stuff that I witnessed as a child. And I tried to make sense of it all with playing SWAT team, and I was just always off in these little fantasies where I was trying to rescue people, mainly my mother and my brothers.
That sounds like it was really challenging.
It was, looking back, I don't know how I made it, but.
Yeah. What about your teenage years? What happens then?
Teenage years were a little bit even worse. Again, I was attracted to the wrong crowd, and I participated in the very beginning, things were actually kind of good. I excelled in sports, and I was really popular in high school, mainly because I was a good listener, and I was known as in high school as the teddy bear. Everybody would run to me and talk to me about their problems, and I was always good at making them feel better. So a lot of people liked me.
I can see that in you. You still have that teddy bear quality.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, right. So take us through it. What happens after high school?
Well, I guess in high school, I started using marijuana and alcohol, and I quickly was instantly dependent on marijuana and alcohol, and my addiction it didn't take off slowly. It was instantly led into tragic situations. Mainly, I could not focus or make any real connections to my reality. I didn't know what was important. The only thing that worked to make me be able to face life was using drugs. So I missed all the girlfriends and the high school functions, the parties, all of that stuff. I never was a part of it. I was just off on my own, in my own world with my drugs.
Mm. Did that escalate then to harder drugs?
Yeah, I had basically been told by a state trooper and the principal that I could quit school. The state trooper was there because they found a bag of 200 joints in my locker, and he said that you can take these and leave school, or you can say they're not yours and go to jail. So I came up with a pretty quick decision as what to do. And I remember the principal saying, "You're never going to amount to anything. You're a loser. You're a drug addict." And so from that moment, things actually went really well. I got a job. I excelled in the trades and quickly rose to the top. I just had this drive and this ambition to be the best at what I was doing, and things were really well. About 4 years out of high school, I opened my own business and started my life off. I had all those dreams and ambitions to be somebody. And then one of my employees, I remember him coming to work every Saturday, and he'd be broke, asking me for money for lunch and cigarettes. And I asked him, "Where's your money?" And he said, I have these problems. And then one night we went up to the city, and I went to Alphon Street in the city of Rochester, and I was introduced to, I didn't know what it was. I saw the commercials, about, this is your life on drugs and, snorting up your family, your boat, all of those things. So, but I really wasn't unaware of what was about to happen. And I was introduced to crack cocaine, or what they referred to back then was as freebasing. And instantly I was, not only was it the most incredible feeling I've ever experienced in my life, I just knew that was gonna be my life. There was like no choice. I knew that I was gonna lose everything I had. I no longer had the desire to be a tradesman. I just wanted to be a drug addict and stay high. So there was no like ability or warning that went off, other than this drug just answered my I was so racy all the time and constantly running from one thing to another. I could never really accomplish tasks, but when I did that drug, I could suddenly function, literally function effectively and get things done. So that was my solution, became my solution to everything.
Well, I want to ask a lot more about that, but I need to go back in time for a moment.
Okay.
Because you started in Amarillo and then you ended up in Rochester. What brought you to Rochester, New York?
Yeah, my mother was shot in Amarillo, Texas, and me and my brother Tim were kidnapped by my father, taken to California. And so my mother, about 2 months later, came to California. And she convinced the judge to let her take us to lunch. And then we wound up in the Catskills in New York with my uncle. And that's how we kind of moved up to New York State.
Why Rochester?
It wasn't necessarily Rochester. It was the Catskills.
Yeah.
But we did move to Rochester eventually because when my mother sobered up, she went to a place called Flacra. And she got sober around the age of 13. I moved out of the foster homes, back into with mom, but I just was too, I couldn't be handled. And, I wouldn't listen. I was just very defiant and very willful.
Yeah. So you described this experience of freebasing.
Yes.
Of trying what is now considered crack cocaine.
Yeah.
And a light went on, and you found something in that drug that you had been seeking, or that helped you in some way.
Yeah.
Was it the first use that?
It was the very first use. I'll never forget this experience. I was quite terrified because when we walked in the house, the first person I saw was a guy with a shotgun guarding a door. So I was pretty nervous, but we walked in and this lady got 3 bags of powder, put it in a vial, and started boiling it under a flame. And the whole thing just was mesmerizing to watch the process. And then when the drug hit my system, I had instantly, not only was high, but I had this fear like, oh my God, my life is over, I knew it was. I just had this instant, I had about almost $30,000 saved up, a business, and what took me, I want to say 6 or 7 years to build, I lost in a period of 3 months, and that's where it started.
Wow. Well, what happens then? What you start using crack, you lose your business, you spend all your money.
So then what happens is I go back to all the customers I had worked for, and I told them stories, basically to get money, to stay high. I wasn't a criminal back then. I was more or less, I was a hardworking, good person. I just, that drug took a hold of me like nothing ever has in my life before. So I wound up consequences, being prosecuted for fraud on a higher level. $100,000 worth of people that I went through, old customers, and they gave me an opportunity to get sober. They put me in treatment, and if I completed treatment and followed the rules, then I would stay out of prison. And unfortunately, at the time, I just was nowhere near ready to understand or to even grasp what the problem was. So it escalated into prisons, and then what time I was either in prison or institutions for about 15 years, and then back to the streets constantly. Because when I was released, there was no real housing, there was no real support. You were just kind of told, don't give a dirty urine, stay out of police contact, and don't change your residence. But when you don't have a residence to live at, it made things kind of complicated. So I would eventually just return back to use because I had no ability to cope with life. I couldn't process feelings or emotions. Everything was just turned into this massive tornado inside of my head, and I just couldn't. I was like immobilized. I couldn't do anything but use.
Well, Todd, thank you so much for just being forthright and telling your story to our listeners, and it's very dramatic and profound. And I need to ask you. You referenced many years incarcerated. What was your experience of that?
Well, of course, that was almost instantly I realized that I was not prison material. I was locked up with killers, rapists, men that literally function with no conscience. Or it was scary. I was terrified most of the time I was there. I was always on this guard. So later on, I developed this persona or this front as a crazy, insane type of person. I was very quiet, but in prison, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but the quiet ones are the ones that are left alone. You just, nobody messes with them because, when they explode. So
you adopted that persona?
Yeah, it was basically for survival, to survive. And then it changed me because of, not only was I stuck in basically a pen full of animals, I didn't have to just worry about them. I had to worry about the guards, because the guards didn't care. They sat there. They didn't interact with any inmates. We were told to shut our mouths, not bother them, and leave them alone. And then I saw horrible acts of violence towards inmates, inmate on inmate, guard on inmate, and then I saw them cover things up. That the prison was everything you hear about in the movies, and more, much more.
So, Todd, this is a story of trauma upon trauma, and this is one of the things we talk about with street medicine is that the traumas of childhood and adolescence and then in adult life often lead people to try to numb the pain with substance use. And would you say that's your experience? You were numbing?
Absolutely. So I learned two things about trauma. And this was sort of through the experience with I don't know how to say the word, Rastafarians.
Yeah.
Rastafarian, or Rochesterians.
Rochesterians.
Yeah, Rochesterians.
I thought we were talking about
no,
the ganja smoking folks.
No, I learned just these random acts of kindness from people who would sit down with me while I was out of prison, people who would talk with me and engage with me, and just they would share their experiences. And my mindset at that time was that the world hated me and I was a loser. If I was going to be a loser, I was going to be one of the best losers out there, because to be honest with you, in the streets, I elevated to I don't know what you would call it. Everybody looked up to me because I was so good at kind of manipulating and having money and drugs that all the other addicts on the street they had sort of a respect for me. I I would help. I would let them give what I had, and so I felt important, and I felt like I was a human being, but really I didn't even know what living life was about.
Wow. So king of the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about, I have no clue. I've always been housed. I have never slept outside in a city in my life. And I think many of our listeners have not had that experience. You were years and years on the streets of Rochester, which has a pretty severe winter. What's that like to be on the streets?
It was hard. I mean, at the time, fortunately, they didn't have locks on the foyers in the apartment buildings. Later on, by the end of my use, they had locks everywhere. They caught me, so I might have been a part of that. But I would go into apartment foyers. I would take my cold boots off, and I would cover up in the area and try to stay as warm as I could. And then other times I just had to keep moving. It was so cold inside those foyers that you would really freeze to death. So you had to just keep moving. So it was just this exhausting attempt at staying alive, and not only that, trying to find ways and means to get high. So it was rough. I mean, there's over 150, probably 200 hospitalizations for frostbite, total exhaustion, unused to the point of where I'd pass out wherever I was and then be transported to the hospital. Developed rhabdomyolysis from not eating. Went from my normal weight of 190 pounds to 112. Wow. So it was rough.
You could have died.
I could have died and almost did many times.
Wow. What'd you do for food?
So in the very beginning, I refused to eat out of garbage cans. So I would, to be honest with you, I didn't eat in the first 20 years on the streets. I would steal a Little Debbie and a 25-cent juice, and that would be my diet. Later on, I had to ask people for food because, and then of course the times where there was no food available, I found out the best garbage cans or dumpsters to go to and get good food. I found some good meals, but I also found some pretty bad meals.
Were you a victim of violence on the streets?
Yeah, I was a victim of many violent acts, and also a victim of witnessing extreme violence towards other human beings, animals. I was just in a world that I didn't belong, and I couldn't get out. I didn't know what the problem was.
Did you have a street name?
My street name was Tex or Charles Manson. That's what I was called. So,
what led to the Charles Manson moniker?
I'm not sure. I had this long hair down past my shoulders, a beard all the way down to my nipples. So I was, of course I was unkept, so I didn't look too appealing.
So did you make attempts at getting off the streets?
I made many attempts, many sincere tries at being sober, or getting sober. But for me, the issue, the education and stuff, the first rehab was absolutely incredible. I loved it. I learned a lot. But the way they treated alcoholism back then was they just send you back to a rehab. And unfortunately, the rehabs didn't really understand what the problem was. They just gave you an education. They told you drugs were bad. This is what it does to your liver. But they never really got into how it's affecting your mind and why how it just complicates everything. So for many years, I was always referred back to just chemical dependency, and it wasn't until I got into finally my last attempt, they said you don't need chemical dependency, you need mental health. And once the focus was combined with my own program of going to meetings and participating in that program of recovery, once I got to mental health, everything came into a perspective to where I could understand it and not self-destruct.
Tell us more about that. What was the mental health intervention that helped you?
So it all began with your organization, Street Medicine. I met many, or our organization, whatever, however you want to call it. So I came across these people that literally accepted me for who and what I was. At the end, I didn't change my clothes for, upwards of 4 or 5 months. So I had a particular odor, and of course I had that feeling of just deadness. If you've ever stared into a dead person's eyes, they're alive, but they're dead inside. I was like that. But these people were just kind human beings who suggested maybe that I go downstairs and look at some clothes, suggested maybe that I might want to get a haircut, and they would provide the means to get a haircut. They kind of did things, instead of telling us how much we stunk and how ugly and fearful we looked, they accepted us, and because of all the mannerisms that street people develop are a little different. Like you spit in your hands to comb your hair, you kind of do a lot of weird things, and there's just dog eat dog. They were able to somehow make sense and order of that madness inside, and they worked with me. And then I came across medical professionals that were really more interested in my problem rather than my symptoms. They didn't just look at treat my symptoms of the sores and the abscesses and all the holes and stuff that developed into my body as a result of ID drug use. They engaged with me on really sometimes intimate levels, where they talked to me about my life, and they never pushed me into a direction. They always just sort of walked with me. And I remember certain professionals asking me, how can I help you? And that was almost like it just brought me to tears inside, because I just knew that person was sincere. And also I was so trapped in the addiction itself that I could not see a way out. But I saw this person in front of me who was in the trenches, not only with me, but with countless others. And I saw this calm spirit of let's walk together out of this. That's what kind of got my attention and made me want to start this process.
Well, Todd, that's powerful, and it sounds like just human kindness from caregivers really helped you turn things around.
Yeah, it did. It did.
Yeah, and that's just a word to the wise for all of our listeners and street medicine programs all over the country, that a reminder that the rapport and relationship that we build with patients and the kindness we can show can be more curative than any of our medications or interventions or referrals or anything else we do. Just that simple human kindness is what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Yeah, because it basically at the lowest point of homelessness, we're kind of dehumanized. We don't feel, we don't care, we're not capable of it. But these people that worked with me were kind of brought me into my own humanness, brought back to my humanness.
Yeah.
Like they made me feel like there's a real person underneath these dirty clothes, underneath this scraggly hair and beard.
Yeah. But you clearly, Todd Lucero has some resources that Todd needed to rely on to overcome these decades of incarceration and living on the streets and using crack. And tell us about that. Tell us about, we've kind of talked about your descent into experiencing homelessness and being a rough sleeper and using substances. Yep. Tell us about the ascent. How did this kindness from the street medicine team touched you and maybe gave you some encouragement? But Todd had to do a lot of work.
Yes.
Tell us about Todd's journey out of this.
So the journey out really consisted of, at the time, at the very end, I had schizophrenia, drug-induced schizophrenia. I was at this level, I was at this place of this jumping off point where I wasn't going to talk about suicide. I was actually planning it. So I had been working with a mental health therapist for about 6 months prior to this day, trying to get clean, talking about many ways of getting clean and how I was going to do this. But in the end, I was utterly hopeless of this ever happening. But the first step to recovery was I was at a harm reduction center shooting and smoking drugs. And I looked out into this mobile crisis van unit, and I saw 2 nurses looking at me, not with like disgust, but with fear and anguish. And for some reason, it penetrated me, and I saw myself literally for who I was. Like, it all brought me back to the old guy before that day of cocaine. I had to ask myself a question, Todd. Do you really want to go out like this? I mean, I was really at the point of death, and I went to the mental health therapist. I expressed to her that I was having problems with TVs and stereos and cell phones, that they were all talking to me and conspiring to kill me and all this other. And she gently said, maybe this is something I can't help you with, but will you trust me? And I'll wait here with you till the ambulance gets here. And for some reason, I did. It was the most fearful and terrifying moment of my life, because I was utterly terrified of life without drugs, but I suddenly realized that I could no longer live the life that I dreamed of, that I would either had to continue down that horrifying journey or accept a new way of life. And for me, it was all about action. It was following the next right thing to do. And there were people along the way that gently suggested, they didn't cage me up and say, we're taking you to your appointment. They said, here's your appointment. And they offered many times bus fare or whatever we needed to get there. But point is you were trusted with that responsibility. And there was something about doing it that made me feel better. Piece by piece, I started feeling better. And a week into recovery, I had a heart attack and a stroke as a result of the cocaine abuse and the high blood pressure. But I remember asking people, I said, I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. And I didn't get like answers like do this, do that. I got, well, what can we do to help? And these are your decisions. And they literally had to show me apartments. They had to show me other agencies that were available. They didn't just give me a piece of paper and say, here, figure it out. They actually helped me because they understood that a drug addict and a person with mental illness, we don't have the ability to navigate through all this crap that you have to get through when you're first getting sober. It's not present. We have the attention span of a gnat. We're racy. Nothing makes sense to us because our brains aren't working properly. What I did is, number one, I surrendered to the reality that I needed a new way of life. And I followed direction as best as I could. I was still a defiant, willful, wayward type of guy, but I knew that I had to make that appointment. I had to listen. I had to just make a connection with people. So it was kind of like step by step. And then about 6 months into recovery, or about 3 months into recovery, I met my sponsor, who was basically an addict who had been through that life and been sober a number of years. And I walked with him out of that part. And it's been a journey outward since then. It's all about action and letting go of the past and healing. I learned about my trauma, that I remember seeing acts of violence on the street and in prison, and I remember thinking, man, I really don't have it that bad because of the stuff that I witnessed. And so that kind of drew me out of feeling sorry for myself. I hate to say it because the mere mention of that when I was in that sickness would infuriate me, and because I felt like nobody really cared about what happened to me. But what I had to realize was that trauma was no longer present. I was reliving it. And I had developed so many ways of thinking about myself and patterns of behavior that were basically running my life into the rut. They were running my life into self-destruction. So it did take therapy, it did take soul searching, and it did take a power greater than myself, which is I believe in God. I believe, I don't have a name for it all the time, but every morning I meditate. I listen to songs, journeys. I think of other people getting clean now and how I can help them, like calling somebody that needs a call. They need to be called. It makes them feel important enough to be a part of that process. So the healing today is just a constant awareness of others and their suffering, and a sense of gratitude for the gift that I have today, which is sobriety. It's priceless.
Todd, congratulations on your sobriety and on your new life. And so impressive that you're able to then turn your wounds inside out and reach out to those who need you and be of service and love to others. I just am so impressed by that.
Thank you.
Tell us about your life now. Where are you living? What are you doing?
So my life now is, it's beautiful in one respect. I own and operate a business. I have employees. I no longer view myself as a loser or all washed up. I view myself as a human being, kind of living life with others in this world. And I focus more on not so much what I can get from this world, but what I can give back to the world. So it's great, but it's also stressful because I don't know how to live this life. Sometimes I feel behind. I started growing up at the age of 54, and I'll be 57 in another another month. So it's difficult. Like I'm facing reality, like credit card bills and truck payments and trailer payments and employees and compensation, liability, and trying to make it all work. But it's also very exciting to step into those shoes of responsibility and accountability, and people look up to me. They like to be around me now.
How long are you sober, Todd?
It'll be 2 years next month on the 6th, February 6th.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is that a daily struggle still?
It's not so much a struggle. It's more of, it's not a struggle because once you focus more on the healing instead of the past, you suddenly gain a sense of life and importance and reason. So every morning I wake up with intention and a purpose. And if I don't see the purpose or feel the purpose, I still I give my attention to the right way of thinking. I don't listen to the madness or the guy inside of me that tells me I'm not big enough, I'm not good enough. I listen to the one that has said, look, you made it out of this, you survived this, so you can survive life. And if you put half of effort you put into using into life, look at where you are and look at where you're going.
Todd, thank you so much. This has been fantastic for our listeners and for all of us to hear your story and to be inspired and motivated to be better people ourselves by your journey. We always ask one final question of, if you could do one thing to make the world a better place, what would it be?
I would just be Todd. I would no longer try to put this image in front of who I am. I would just be Todd. And I would encourage others to just be themselves. No changes, just be who they are and live their best life. And that has more of an impact and effect on society than anybody can imagine.
All right. Todd, thank you so much for being on Streetside. We have so enjoyed talking to you and hearing of your life.
Thank you, brother.
You.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Be well.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individuals included and are not representative of the opinions of the Street Medicine Institute or the Street Medicine Institute Student Coalition. Do not use this podcast as medical advice and instead see your own provider for medical care.